Morning. This morning, instead of our minute for mission, well, I guess it's not sort of instead of, it's kind of a different sort of mission that we're talking about today. A mission that the congregation has asked us as the Green Team to be involved in, and something that the Green Team had been contemplating as that was happening. And that task that we begin today is to start to offer concrete actions that we can all take to address the issue of climate change, because we're learning more and more about the hazard, but we really need to know what we can do about it in every area of our lives. So we're going to start with a big impact area, transportation. And got a little visual there to keep us focused. For the average Canadian, transportation is the cause of 35% of our personal carbon footprint. Think about that. 1/3 of our total carbon footprint comes from transportation that we all do. And if we were to eliminate our carbon dioxide emissions from transportation alone, then each of us would be most of the way to meeting our 2030 target of 50% reduction in our personal lives. And that's a target we're told we must hit if we want to avoid climate disaster. So there's a huge opportunity here in the transportation area. So what can we do to reduce our transportation emissions? Easiest to do is to walk or ride a bike. Every time we do that, our emissions go to zero, or as close as we can get to zero. That's a big impact. Of course, it's really difficult to do that because of our weather for a large portion of the year, and because our city and our province and our country has not been set up for pedestrians or bicycles, but been set up for cars for the last many decades. Many of the goods and services we need are not available in our neighborhoods. So longer term, we need to really change that. But right now, you can talk to local politicians with an election coming up. Talk to them right away about prioritizing getting businesses back into neighborhoods and away from malls and big box stores that we have to drive to. No other way of getting there. Change the way our city is set up. And right now, in the meantime, we can start walking and biking as much as we can. While that bigger change is taking place, and when the weather is not conducive to cycling, we can choose to take public transportation. Public transportation has been shown to move people around using a tiny carbon footprint compared to driving a gas-powered car. And it can be done for a tiny fraction of what it costs to own and operate a car. An adult can ride Brandon Transit for a whole month for only $86. You can't even buy auto insurance for that. And seniors and children and students, it's even lower cost, at just over $50 for those of us in those categories. It does take some planning. At times, it is less convenient than driving a car, but how inconvenient will it be if our planet becomes unlivable? The fact is that public transit becomes more convenient as more people use it, making it easier to expand service. And so, once again, right now is a great time to advocate with prospective city councilors to make public transit more effective, more available. And right now, as much as we can use public transit. So there are two very accessible ways to reduce our use of cars powered by fossil fuels within the city. Outside the city has become a problem for us. Bus and train services have been abandoned by business and government, sadly. There are places in the world where nobody needs a car ever, because train and bus service is so good. Much of Europe, for instance, and I've noticed on trips to Mexico, sometimes a country considered underdeveloped It seems like there's a bus that leaves for practically everywhere in the country that leaves every half hour or less. Different is not impossible. It's already happening in many places around the world. But once again, until we get to the better public transit option, electric cars are a real option. Now, there are lots of myths around that would have people believe it's impossible to rely on an electric car on the prairies. They won't work in the cold, we've heard. You'll run out of battery power, and then what will you do, we have heard. Of scare stories go on and on. But here's an interesting fact, that Madeline and I have now relied on an electric car since February of 2021, making it through half of that winter and all of the one just passed for 21-22. We drove to Calgary and back in December. We didn't perish. We've driven to British Columbia twice. We've driven to Southern Ontario twice, coming back in November on one of those trips. And we drove to Kentucky in early March. There's never been a cold day when it didn't work perfectly. It's in fact the warmest car we have ever driven. And we've never heard that motor sound that we all dread, arr, 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 at 40 below. None of that with an electric car. Others in our congregation, I know, have had similar positive experiences. With a bit of planning, getting from one charger to the next on a long journey has been pretty easy, really. And it's gotten easier as the number of charging stations continues to expand. Now, there is a carbon cost to building an electric car, but there's a carbon cost for building a gas car too. There's a carbon cost to generating electricity, but there's an ongoing, never-ending, large carbon cost to mining oil and processing gasoline. But once you have the gas in your car, the average Canadian will release 5 tons of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere every year, 5 tons. And once you have the electricity in your car battery, using it as fuel will result in 0 carbon emissions here in Manitoba. You've gone from 5 tons to 0, reducing your carbon footprint by 35%. That's certainly worth doing for any of us who can afford it, which is not all of us. But just about any of us who buy a new car can afford it. There's not a lot of difference in the original sticker price. And here's the bonus, once you have it, it's ridiculously cheap to drive. About 2 cents a kilometer, as opposed to about 20 cents a kilometer for the average gas vehicle. That's $400 a year fueling our electric car versus $4,000 a year for a gas-powered car. $300 a month makes your monthly payments look pretty cheap for buying it. And you're going to hear, as we have more of these minutes, green minutes, that that's one of the added beauties of many carbon-saving ideas. They will actually save you money. Walking or biking will save you money and put you in better shape too. Riding the bus will save you money. Driving electric will, in the long term, save you money. But even if it didn't, wouldn't it be worth it to make some sacrifices for a livable planet? If we do think it is worth it, these are things that we can start to do right now.